Thank you, John. Thank you, Marianne. We will be in 1 Samuel 17. If you have a Bible, you can turn there. There will be verses on the screen as well as we go through it. We have been walking through 1 Samuel as we prepare and heading towards Christmas. The theme for the whole series is looking for a king. And so in 1 Samuel, this is where the people of God begin. They ask for a king. They get their first kings. But those kings, while David, who we're talking about today, did have lots of good qualities, they weren't the king that was promised, the one that they were looking for. And so we're leading into Christmas when the people did get that king that they were looking for. But today, as we're looking at a story that's very familiar, David and Goliath. I mean, there are lots of people, even in the secular world, that, when you talk about giants, Goliath comes to mind, even if they haven't had a whole lot to do with church. So the story is familiar to us, but I think it can go beyond just a Sunday school story, but has some good principles for us as we deal with life, as we face our giants, our challenges in life. Because I don't know about you, but I found that there are challenges in life, right? When you're a kid, your biggest challenge might be, okay, what am I going to do with my life? But as you get older, more and more challenges. The longer you live, the more challenges you face. And as believers, we have a real a blessing and a benefit of having God on our side to help us, encourage us. So we're going to be walking through this passage of 1 Samuel, but I'm just going to pray as we start that God would open our hearts and ears to hear. Father, we thank you for your word as we open this up. Lord, as we go through a familiar story, may you bring it freshly to us. May you challenge us with it as we look at it, Father, and may you speak to us this morning. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. So we're going to start looking at it, but where we are here, so Saul was the first king. We looked at Saul. Saul was selected. He was very talking, so head and shoulders above everybody else. He started out okay, but then he began to disobey, and God ended up rejecting him as king. He's still serving as the political king, but last week we looked at how David was anointed by Samuel to become the next king. And so over the next little bit, we see this tension. As Saul still being king, David's actually God's chosen, but he's not the people's king as of yet. And so that's where we stand right now with David. As we look at David, was just a young shepherd boy when he was appointed king. He was the 8th son of Jesse and was from the town of Bethlehem, which we know was where that David's line and of his town is where Jesus was going to be born and be of the family of. And so we see that fulfilled at Christmas time. And so David is here. So we're going to just pick it up in verse 1. Now the Philistines gathered their forces for war and assembled at Sokoh in Judah. They pitched camp at Ethas Demim between Sokak and Azekah. Anybody else want to read this? Saul and the Israelites assembled and camped at the valley of Elah and drew up their battle line to meet the Philistines. The Philistines occupied one hill and the Israelites another, with the valley between them. So you can just picture this. They have two kind of mountainsides. And if you know anything about battle, if you're on a mountainside, everyone who attacks you has to come up the mountain to try to attack, so it's a bit harder to do. So they're each on their mountain waiting, but then they're preparing for a battle where they would both come down and fight in the valley. And so, but they're a bit more safe in their own ground because it's harder for the other army to come up and attack. So that's how they are. This valley between them, setting up camp in between, and they're going to have this battle between them. So a champion named Goliath, who was from Gath, came out of the Philistine camp. His height was 6 cubits. Everybody know what a cubit is about, 18 inches. I know that means, but which is about 45 centimeters. So he's essentially 9 foot tall or 3 meters roughly. So pretty tall, a bit taller than me by a lot. Yes. He'd be bumping his head on the ceiling here. So, John, the guy you saw, probably was big, but probably not quite that big. No, and I've seen some big people. I enjoy basketball, watching basketball, and there's some big guys there. But Goliath would dominate in the NBA, that's for sure. So he's 6 cubits in a span. Normally a cubit was from your elbow to your hand, so I guess the longer your arm was, the bigger you had. So he had a bronze helmet on his head and wore a coat of scale armor of bronze weighing 5,000 shekels, which is like 56 kilos. So that's just his armor. On his legs, he wore bronze greaves, and a bronze javelin was slung on his back. His spear shaft was like a weaver's rod, and its iron point weighed 600 shekels. And his shield bearer went ahead of him. So he's clad out in all this armor. It's heavy just because of how big he is, right? So that he's strong enough to where he carries that into battle without a problem. I don't know about you, but if I was carrying armor that weighed 50 kilos, it would be, I wouldn't be moving real good in battle. But this just shows how big he was. Goliath stood and shouted to the ranks of Israel, "Why do you come out and line up for battle? Am I not a Philistine, and are you not the servants of Saul? Choose a man and have him come down to me. If he is able to fight and kill me, we will become your subjects. If I overcome him and kill him, you will become our subjects and serve us." Then the Philistine said, "This day I defy the armies of Israel. Give me a man. Let us fight each other." On hearing the Philistines' words, Saul and all the Israelites were dismayed and terrified. I don't know about you. If I had somebody about my same size, and I think, maybe I could take him, but this is a big guy. This is someone who has a big spear, big sword. He's protected by all his armor. I would not think I would have a whole lot of a chance to fight against him. And thinking about the Israelite army and then their king, who do we think is the biggest Israelite there? Saul, right? If he's head and shoulders, so he's at least getting up there. He's not 9 foot, but he's probably one of their biggest warriors, Saul. But is he going to fight Goliath? No, it says him and all the Israelites were terrified. I would be too. I would not want to go up and fight against this monstrosity of a man, battle-hardened man. And so for 40 days, this is what happens. And as we think through this, there are some things I want us to get here. The Israelites are facing a challenge. Their challenge is in a 3-meter tall man named Goliath. All right, that's their challenge at this stage. If they can just defeat this one man, it will save many lives. Because instead of both armies having to fight, it's just one man. But they don't see any possible way. And so for 40 days, they waited in fear as Goliath issued his challenge. Not one of them was brave enough to take it up. Not one of them was thinking the way David will think later. We are God's army. God is with us. So for 40 days, there's just stalemate of not one person volunteering. Anybody here? Would you volunteer?
Depends what weapon I have.
Yes. How about a sling? Modern weapons, maybe. They were afraid. But that's the same way when we face challenges, that sometimes we face our challenges. They come with fear. Challenges can cause us to be stuck in fear or inaction. Our challenges become fear. Fear kind of paralyzes us, and we can get stalled out. And we've talked about fear multiple times over the last few weeks in different ones of the stories from 1 Samuel. We can be fearful, right? When we, either ourselves or someone we love, gets bad news at the doctor, fear creeps in. When we are struggling to pay our bills or struggling with different things in life that come at us, we can be fearful. When we're in conflict with other people, whether at work or in families or however that looks like for us, when we're in the midst of that really intense conflict, fear can come in and cause us to be inactive. So for 40 days, that army was doing nothing except standing there, listening to that challenge and twiddling their thumbs, wondering who was going to accept it. That's what fear can do. That's what challenges can cause us to do. Challenges come in many shapes and sizes. I kind of already have talked about that. They can come in really big sizes, but every day we face challenges. Every day we face the challenge of how do I live for God today? Every day we face the challenge of, meeting our needs, working, all the different things we do. There are challenges every day, but how do we respond to these challenges? Are we people who let fear come in, let inaction come in? Or are we willing to go to the one who's able to help us? We have multiple people in our congregation who we've been praying for health issues. And so these people face serious issues, and what do? We go to the Lord in prayer. Ask the God of the universe for healing, ask him for help, for support, for comfort. How do we respond in our own lives when we face challenges? Do we let fear come in? Fear drive us to inaction, which then means we're not really living for the Lord if we're living in fear. Luckily, in enters he's King David, even though he's not he's been anointed by Samuel, but he has not been recognized by the people yet. So we're going to jump to verse 20. Early in the morning, David left the flock in the care of a shepherd. So at this time, 3 of David's brothers are fighting in the army with Saul. And so David is back home in Bethlehem. And so his father is sending him with some food to help support his brothers. Obviously, the battle's going on for a long time. 40 days is a long time. There's only, they would need supplies to come in with food. So David is sent by his father Jesse to take some food. So obviously his job is still the shepherd boy, and he has to leave the family sheep with the shepherd there. Loaded up and set out as Jesse had directed. He reached the camp as the army was going out to its battle positions, shouted the war cry. So every day they would get ready to fight. And Israel and the Philistines were drawing up their lines, facing each other. David left his things with a keeper of supplies, ran to the battle lines. This young, 16, 17-year-old boy is kind of probably excited to see what's going to happen. It's a bit of adventure here with the big brothers, runs to the battle lines and asks his brothers how they were. As he was talking with them, Goliath, the Philistine champion from Gath, stepped out from his lines and shouted his usual defiance, and David heard it. Whenever the Israelites saw the man, they all fled from him in great fear. So 40 days later, they're not getting any braver, right? They're still fleeing in fear. There are big things in life that happens, and sometimes we can live in fear for a very long time. Continue in verse 25. Now the Israelites have been saying, do you see how the man keeps coming out? He comes out to defy Israel. The king will give great wealth to the man who kills him. He will also give him his daughter in marriage and will exempt his family from taxes in Israel. Wouldn't that be great? Be exempt from taxes. Maybe I'll change my mind. Maybe I will go face Goliath. David asked the men standing near him, what will be done for the man who kills this Philistine and removes his disgrace from Israel? Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? They repeated to him what they had been saying and told him, this is what will be done for the man who kills him, as we read previously. When Eliab, David's oldest brother, heard him speaking with the men, he burned with anger at him and asked, why have you come down here? And with whom do you leave these few sheep in the wilderness? I know how conceited you are and how wicked your heart is. You came down only to watch the battle. Good big brother trying to put his little brother in his place. So I'm the oldest. I have two younger brothers. I was always trying to put in their place. But his words are not true, because we know that David's heart is not in the wrong place. His heart is on the things of the Lord. And so David could have shied away at this. Oh, my big brother just told me off. I'm just a little boy. But that's not what happened. He didn't let negative things said to him change his own perspective. How many of you here have ever had something happening and people spoke negatively to you about it? Or they said things that were defeated, a defeatist type attitude. We don't have to listen to those sorts of things. And David luckily didn't. And so there's a bit of commotion, and word comes to Saul about some of the things David is saying. And so in verse 32, David is before Saul. David said to Saul, let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine, because that's exactly what they were doing for 40 days. Your servant will go and fight him. So this young 17-year-old boy who's used to watching sheep comes and volunteers to fight. Saul replied, you are not able to go out against the Philistine and fight him. You are only a young man, and he has been a warrior from his youth. But David said to Saul, your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. When a lion or bear came and carried off sheep from the flock, I went after it, struck it, and rescued the sheep from its mouth. David, is that what you used to do? You used to defeat those lions and bears to protect your sheep? When it turned on me, I seized it by its hair, struck it, and killed it. Your servant has killed both lion and bear. This uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, because he has defied the armies of the living God. The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of the Philistine. There's lots in this little bit. We see, one, that David has been prepared by God. His past, the things he's gone through, the struggles he faced, the other challenges, has prepared him for this moment. Anybody here ever gone through something and you thought, why do I have to go through this? Why does this have to happen? We all have. We all question that. But sometimes God uses difficult things in our lives to mold us, to shape us. And as we look into this, it's not just his own power he's looking at. He's recognizing that Goliath is defying the armies of the Lord, recognizing who is with them, and recognizing he's not saying, I'm so great, I'm a great shot with my slingshot. Those bears and lions had no chance. He's saying, God rescued me from them, gave me the strength, the ability to defeat them, and he will do the same now. So how do we meet challenges with faith? How do we face these difficult things in life and just trusting God and allow him through our prayers and going to him. And David did something different than all the other Israelites that were there. He did not look at Goliath and become fearful. Right? There may be some innate fear in him, but it wasn't fear that drove him to inaction. It was fear to be overcome by his faith and trust in Jesus. He didn't trust in his own strength. Yes, God had prepared him. Yes, he had defeated some lions and bears, but it wasn't in his own strength that he trusted. And he knew that God was with him. He knew that they were God's chosen people, God would be with them. If we are now we are his children, right? The song early, no longer a slave to sin, I am a child of God. Great song choices, by the way, for these introducing this bit. But we're not a slave to fear anymore. We are children of God. We have a heavenly Father who cares about us, and God was with David, and David knew it. He was willing to trust in God, put his life on the line to be there and support the people of God. Ephesians 6, 10, and 11 says, be strong in the Lord and in his mighty power. Put on the full armor of God so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes. David recognized that his armor, his preparedness was not in being a soldier, not in the swords and spears, but it was his armor was God. God was the one who was going to protect him and be there for him. So let's continue the story. Verse 38. Then Saul dressed David in his own tunic. He put on a coat of armor on him and a bronze helmet on his head. So he's given him all this armor to use. David fastened on his sword and the tunic and tried walking around because he was not used to them. I know when we were doing our series on the armor of God, Stu had a friend who actually had some armor who goes and fights in medieval reenactments. It was very heavy. Elijah, you got to put it on, didn't you? Would you have been able to run and fight around in that real easily? No. And David was not used to it. You have to train, your muscles have to get to work and get used to that kind of armor. And this is, they're trying to put David in the armor that they think will help him defeat Goliath. If you would have fought Goliath on Goliath's terms, there was no way he was going to win. But he had to fight Goliath on his own, but also on God's terms, and on what God had given him, how God had prepared him. I cannot go in these, he said to Saul, because I am not used to them. So he took them off. Then he took his staff in his hand, chose 5 smooth stones. So David's faith wasn't super good. He could have just taken 1 stone, but he grabbed 5, right? 5 smooth stones from the stream and put them in the pouch of his shepherd's bag. And with his sling in his hand, he approached the Philistine. Anybody here ever had a sling before? I've had a slingshot. It was like a fork. You pull it back on rubber bands, real easy to aim. That's not what he had, right? He had a slingshot that was basically 2 strips of leather with a little bigger bit of leather in the middle, where he would hold the 2 strings, put a rock in the little pocket, sling it around his head, and then release one of the strings so that the rock would fly. I don't know about you, but that would take a lot of effort and work to learn how to be accurate with that kind of a slingshot. Anybody here ever tried to use one of those? How good were you, John?
My brother was better than me.
Yes. So you could kind of hit that wall, right? But could you hit a dot on the wall? Oh, you hit that one? Okay. So if you were aiming for me, all these people needed to be, to duck and cover. It was not an easy thing to use. Obviously, David would have had many hours of time watching his sheep with a sling. And what do boys do, right? We we play with things. And so he had his sling, and he probably got used to it. So it would have been a decent shot with it. It's much better than what we would do. But it's not a weapon where you just think I'm going to go in and defeat somebody like Goliath. But David trusted in God's ways, not the world's ways. They tried to get him to dress the way they wanted him, to put on the things they wanted him, but he did not do those things. God had prepared David as a shepherd, and later on he does become a great warrior, and I'm sure he didn't just go into battle with slings. I'm sure he began to use swords and armor and all those sorts of things. But right now he's prepared as a shepherd, and so he needs to use the way God has prepared him. David displayed his trust in God. He wasn't trying to put on all this armor thinking hopefully that'll stop Goliath's sword. Put a helmet, no, need something for my neck, or he might take it off. He in all of this, at any point, he could have said, you know what, maybe this isn't a very good idea. Maybe I'm not quite prepared for this. Anybody ever got thrown into something you didn't feel prepared for? Anybody who became a parent probably feels that way at some stage, right? But we have to trust in God. There's a saying we've said multiple times here before: God doesn't call the equipped; He equips the called. Just the idea that you don't have to have everything figured out and right before you go, but God will help you and equip you. And he displayed his trust in God and trusted that God was at work and was going to use him. He didn't say, let's take the next 40 days and you can train me how to use a sword. Let's take the next 40 days and I'll do some strength training so I can handle the armor. He just trusted in God. Do we trust in God in all circumstances? Is that our first thought when difficult things happen, when a challenge comes? It's our first thought to go to God, trust in him. When we trust in God, that doesn't mean we don't, ask for support or ask for help. It doesn't mean that, we just pray and do nothing else. But it's our first instinct when we're facing these challenges to go to God, the one who has the strength and power to comfort us, help us, to put people in our lives to help us. Many times we can just feel overwhelmed by those big things when we need to immediately stop and turn to God. So let's go to the battle. 42. He looked David over, so this is Goliath, and saw that he was little more than a boy. He was probably starting to think, wow, this is going to be easier than I thought. Glowing with health and handsome, and he despised him. Maybe he's a bit offended. But that's who came to come against him. He said to David, am I a dog that you come to me with sticks? He had a staff or his shepherd's staff in his hand. And the Philistine cursed David by the gods. Come here, he said, and I'll give you your flesh to the birds and the wild animals. He's a bit confident, isn't he? And David said to the Philistine, you come against me with sword and spear and javelin. I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands, and I will strike you down and cut off your head. This very day I will give the carcasses of the Philistine army to the birds and to the wild animals, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. All those gathered here will know that it is not by sword or spear that the Lord saves, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give all of you into our hands. So the little 17-year-old boy in the midst of all these battle-hardened men, and God's giving him courage to speak. And he's not saying how great he's going to be. He's giving all the praise. God's going to do this. God's not going to come. I'm not some great soldier with a sword that, going to move faster than you and get around behind you or, defeat you in swordsmanship. I'm coming with a staff and a piece of leather, a few stones in my hip pocket. That's what he's going to do. And when we face challenges, we don't know how God might intervene to help us, to support us and get us through. But he is going to. And it may look silly from the outside, but God is a God of power who is there willing to help us. Let's continue. As the Philistine moved closer to attack him, David ran quickly toward the battle line to meet him. Reaching into his bag, taking out a stone, he slung it and struck the Philistine on the forehead. The stone sank into his forehead, and he fell face down on the ground. So David triumphed over the Philistine with a sling and stone, without a sword in his hand. He struck down the Philistine and killed him. I can put it on the screens, but after this, he takes Goliath's own sword, chops off his head, just like he had said beforehand that God was going to give him the battle. One shot, one sling hit Goliath right in the forehead. If you know anything about armor, usually he would have had a helmet. He would hit just below the helmet, right here in the forehead. Knocked Goliath down. It says it killed him. David made sure of that by chopping off his head. A bit gruesome. But God gave Goliath into his hands. And that was quite the shot. To hit right, he had all this armor, 50 kilos of armor. He had this big helmet on. Hit it just in the right spot. Why? Because David was a good shot? I believe. Yes, maybe it was a good shot, but I believe it was because God helped him. God was with him. Running towards battle with a sling, that's quite the shot. But God was on his side. God was with him. So David is victorious with God's help. And he has declared that God is with him. Sometimes we need that kind of encouragement. We need to declare, God is with me. I've gone to him. I've prayed to him. He is with me. He's going to help me through whatever that challenge is. Just declare it. And I'm not going into the name it and claim it type thing, but I'm saying God promises that he's going to be with his children. He doesn't promise that he's always going to do things the way we think he should, but he promises that he will always be with us. And we can declare that God is with us. David's victory was really God's victory. And from the get-go, David gave God the glory. God gave him the recognition to the Philistines, to the Israelites who heard. David doesn't go in there and say, I'm going to do this. Don't worry, Saul. I may not look like much, but I'll handle this problem for you. And all along the way, he points to Jesus. Or sorry, not Jesus. So he points to God. He points to the one who's going to help him. So the victory, while David stood there victorious over Goliath, the victory was really God's victory. So as we finish, I just ask a few questions. What challenges or giants are you facing right now? Again, sometimes those challenges come in different sizes. We all have the daily challenges of life, and we have big challenges that come to us from time to time as this life throws it at us. And are we allowing those things to overcome us? Whether it's sin, whether it's fear, whether it's all the things that it can pull on us. Are we letting them overcome us? Are we becoming inactive because we're afraid? Like the Israelites at the beginning of the story. And how can we put our trust in God to help us be victorious? To overcome those things or to get through them. Sometimes victory is just getting through issues, getting through things. Maybe it doesn't look like standing victorious over something defeated. But God is able to help us be victorious over sins, over temptations, victorious over struggles we may have. God is there willing to help us through those situations if we just trust in Him and go to Him in those times of need. So no matter how great the giants or challenges in our lives may seem, we serve a God who is greater than those challenges, at work in my life, in your life, and at work in the world today. We can trust in Him. We're now going to have just a time to do our one thing. So if you have your sheet of paper, you can write on there. If you don't, you can put it in the notes of your phone. But what's one thing you've learned, one thing that God's challenged you with? What's one thing you might want to write down